Two apartment towers, same street, same year, same concrete supplier, practically the same blueprint. The earthquake hits. When the dust settles, one of them is a 12-story pile of rubble with people still inside. The other one, 50 feet away, doesn't have a single crack in the paint. Not luck, not fate. Physics, and it has an exact, testable explanation. But here's the part that should scare you more than the earthquake itself. In the United States, the building code would have stopped one of those two towers from ever being built the way it was. The other one, the one that survived, followed rules almost identical to what you'd find in California or Washington State. Same earthquake, same ground. One country's rule book against a rule book that was never written or never enforced. Before anything else, this video is about the people of Venezuela, about the ones still searching for someone, about the ones who've lost everything, about every neighbor who hasn't stopped helping for days. You are not alone. Now, over the next 15 minutes, you're going to understand three things. Why an earthquake's magnitude almost never decides who lives and who dies. Why a building code that exists on paper in the U.S. can simply not exist somewhere else. And why the buildings that came down in Venezuela failed in a way American engineers have spent 70 years specifically designing against. By the end, you won't just understand this earthquake, you'll understand why the exact same magnitude in a different country kills a completely different number of people. On June 24, 2026, two major earthquakes struck northwestern Venezuela less than 40 seconds apart. A magnitude 7.2 followed by a magnitude 7.5, both centered near Yumare, west of Caracas. Satellite analysis from NASA put the number of damaged or destroyed structures at close to 59,000. The UN's development agency estimated the direct economic damage at roughly $6.7 billion, about 6% of the country's entire GDP. Thousands are confirmed dead. Tens of thousands remain unaccounted for. That's the headline. It doesn't explain why some 12-story towers in La Guaira came down like a stack of cards, while similar towers 3 streets away are still standing with their windows intact. To understand that, forget the number everyone keeps repeating. The magnitude. Because that number is lying to you about what actually kills people. Here's the biggest misunderstanding in every earthquake story. Magnitude measures one single thing: how much energy was released down at the fault, at the exact point where the earth broke. Think of it like measuring the size of a bomb at the moment of detonation. It never changes. A 7.5 earthquake has one magnitude, no matter what happens on the surface afterward. What your building actually feels is something else entirely. Engineers call it intensity. That's how much the ground itself shakes right under the foundation. And intensity isn't one number. It's 1,000 different ones, changing block by block, sometimes house by house. The scale itself is brutal, not linear, multiplicative. Every step up from 6.5 to 7.5 isn't a bit more. It's roughly 32 times more energy. 2 full steps from 5.5 to 7.5 is close to 1,000 times more. A 7.5 releases energy in the range of the largest nuclear weapon ever detonated. Hundreds of megatons released underground in seconds. But that monster energy has to travel. From the fault, through rock, through soil, up into your street. And along the way, everything depends on depth, distance, duration, and one thing almost nobody thinks about: what's directly under your feet. The U.S. Geological Survey says it plainly. Firm bedrock shakes the least. Soft, wet, loose soil shakes the most, and doesn't just shake more. It amplifies the wave. It takes a small tremor and hands it back to you as a whip crack. Two identical buildings can suffer completely different fates depending on 10 feet of dirt underneath them. That's already uncomfortable, but it's not the whole story because there's a second layer to this, and it's the one that decides which specific buildings fall. Every structure on Earth has a note, a wine glass, a bridge, a tuning fork, a building. It's called the natural period, the rhythm at which it wants to sway when something pushes it. Engineers use a rough rule, about 1/10 of a second per floor. A 10-story building sways on a roughly 1 second beat. A 3-story building moves much faster. Now put these two ideas together. Soft ground doesn't just amplify shaking, it shakes at its own rhythm too. And when the ground's rhythm matches a building's natural rhythm, you get resonance. The exact same physics as pushing a kid on a swing. Push randomly and nothing happens. Push at exactly the right moment every time, and the swing goes higher and higher with barely any effort until it's out of control. This is precisely what happened in Mexico City in September 1985. An earthquake centered over 200 miles away, far enough that the city should have been safe. Instead became one of the deadliest urban disasters of the 20th century, because the city sits on the drained bed of an ancient lake. Soft lakebed mud amplified the waves up to 50 times and held them shaking for over 3 minutes. More than 400 buildings collapsed, and critically, they weren't the tallest or the shortest buildings in the city. They were buildings in a very specific height range, buildings whose natural sway matched the lake mud's rhythm almost exactly. Venezuela already learned this lesson once, decades before this earthquake. On July 29, 1967, Caracas, a modern, expanding city full of new apartment towers, was hit by a magnitude 6.5 earthquake, a modest number centered offshore. By any normal expectation, that should have meant a scare and nothing more. Instead, 4 10 to 12-story apartment towers collapsed in the Los Palos Grandes neighborhood, while shorter buildings a few feet away barely cracked. The soil under those specific blocks was deep sediment, over 300 feet of fill sitting on top of bedrock, tuned to a rhythm of 1 to 2 seconds. That's exactly the natural period of a 10 to 12-story tower. The tall buildings resonated like tuning forks. The short ones didn't. The ground chose its victims by height. Here's the detail that should make your skin crawl. The fault that ruptured that night in 1967 belongs to the same fault family that's active in the region right now. The Earth had already left a written warning. And this time, the warning wasn't just felt again, it was ignored by different buildings in a different decade with different codes on the books, or none at all. So you know why a building gets hit. Here's the part that changes everything. Almost none of this has to end in collapse. Engineers have known how to stop it for decades. When a building falls anyway, it's almost never physics losing to the earthquake. It's physics losing to a decision someone made, usually years earlier, in an office, far from any construction site. Buildings fail from the same handful of places, over and over. The most dangerous is called a soft first story. Floors of solid walls stacked above an open ground floor with nothing but a few columns holding it all up. Picture a body with a powerful torso balanced on ankles made of glass. When the shaking hits, all the force concentrates on that one weak floor, and the entire building sits down on itself. The second failure point is invisible. Inside a concrete column, thin steel hoops called stirrups wrap around the vertical rebar like the metal bands around a wooden barrel. Remove the bands, the barrel bursts. Space those hoops too far apart, or skip them to save money, and under stress the concrete spalls off. The rebar buckles like drinking straws, and the column shatters without warning. Without warning, that's the single most important idea in this entire video. A well-built structure is ductile. It bends, it cracks, it groans, it gives you time, like a reed in the wind. A poorly built structure is brittle. It doesn't complain, it doesn't bend. One moment it's standing, the next it snaps like a pencil. When columns fail like that, all at once you get the outcome that kills the most people in any collapse. Pancake collapse, where each floor drops onto the one below it, compressing the entire building down to a fraction of its height, with no space left between slabs for anyone to survive. Here's the reframe that matters most. A modern earthquake-resistant building isn't designed to survive intact. It's designed to sacrifice itself so the people inside survive. The exact same logic as an airbag and a crumple zone in your car. In a serious crash, the car destroys itself on purpose, folds, crushes, absorbs, so that energy never reaches you. The car goes to the scrapyard. You walk away. A building can end up cracked and condemned. If everyone inside walked out alive, it did its job. This is where the comparison with the United States stops being abstract. American seismic code, especially in California, Washington, and Alaska, requires exactly the ductility we just talked about. Mandatory hoop spacing in columns, restrictions on soft-story ground floors unless heavily reinforced, and in high-risk zones, base isolators or moment-resisting frames that let a building flex instead of shatter. None of this is exotic engineering. Some of the oldest examples, like Chicago's old John Hancock Center with its giant X-braces visible on the outside, date back to the 1960s. Japan has taken it even further. Buildings that literally float on rubber and steel bearings, skyscrapers engineered to sway like reeds instead of standing rigid, giant pendulum dampers at the top of towers like Taipei 101, absorbing motion the way a tightrope walker uses a pole to cancel a wobble. Here's the number that puts everything into perspective. In 2010, 2 major earthquakes struck within weeks of each other. Haiti, magnitude 7.0. Chile, magnitude 8.8. That gap in magnitude means Chile's earthquake released roughly 500 times more energy than Haiti's. 500 times. Now, look at the death tolls. Chile, the far stronger quake, lost around 500 people. Haiti, the weaker one, lost hundreds of thousands. The country that got hit 500 times harder lost far fewer lives because Chile has spent decades obsessively updating its seismic code after every major quake, while Haiti at the time had almost no enforced building code at all, and most homes were built by their owners without an engineer ever signing off. Seismologists have a line for this that doesn't leave room for comfort. Earthquakes don't kill people. Buildings kill people. A study published in Nature found that more than 80% of deaths from building collapse in earthquakes over recent decades occurred in countries with abnormally high levels of construction-related corruption. A permit signed that shouldn't have been. An inspection that looked the other way. Rebar quietly left out of a pour to save money. That corruption sits quiet for years, decades even. Then the ground moves, and it becomes the difference between a cracked wall and a mass grave. So go back to those 2 towers on the same street, same year, same concrete. You already have the answer now. It was the soil underneath, deciding how hard the shaking would hit. It was the natural rhythm of each building, deciding whether that shaking turned into resonance. It was the steel inside, or the steel that was never put there, deciding whether the structure bent or snapped. And underneath all of it, it was a decision made by someone in a room long before the ground ever moved. That's the hardest lesson in all of this. Nature isn't cruel. It's indifferent. An earthquake's physics doesn't care whether a country is rich or poor, but how we choose to build absolutely does. An earthquake doesn't create the failure. It just reveals it, instantly and without mercy, every decision that was already made when nobody was watching. Venezuela wrote this lesson once before, in 1967. Out of that night came the country's first seismic research institutions and its first modern building code. The same ground is shaking again, and a lot of people are going through something unimaginable right now. This video is dedicated to them, and I want to be clear about why I made it. Not to take anything from a tragedy, but because understanding why buildings fail is the only real way to stop the same mistakes from repeating. If you're into how the things around us actually stand up, and what happens when they don't, this is your channel. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one.